Hello and welcome to Jeff Yu, CEO of Monochrome Asset Management, previous CEO of Binance Australia. Welcome aboard to Bitcoin People, Jeff.
Hi, Kerry. Nice to be here.
Gorgeous to have you on board. You are a serial entrepreneur, heavy hitter. I'm really curious to understand a bit about Monochrome to begin with so that we can establish with the listener what you're currently doing, the project you're currently working on, and the credentials of that business, as it were. And then I want to broaden out and go into a bit of your history. And of course, we'll explore further into the world of Bitcoin from there. So can you tell us a bit about Monochrome, please?
Sure. So Monochrome is an asset management firm that specializes in regulated crypto asset products. And we are the Australia's only operator of a ASIC approved crypto asset retail scheme for Bitcoin. So it's called the Monochrome Bitcoin Trust. We previously operated a wholesale only fund and have worked very closely with the Australia sort of regulatory framework in sort of moving this decentralized asset into a financial product sort of regime. So it's been an interesting journey. I think we're so far we are sort of leading the space, but at the same time we're also looking at our back. So a lot of traditional players are trying to enter this scene as well. We've seen some of the big names are trying to establish Bitcoin products. Some of them failed, but some of them are looking very promising over in the US. But in Australia, we're the only one here.
Okay, so for anyone who might be a retail investor who might be interested in something like this, who may not be buying their own Bitcoin, who are looking for an opportunity to get involved, but they're not comfortable with self-custody and, the complexity of buying on an exchange and then kind of moving it off exchange. When you say ASIC regulated, and I know that this has been a big deal for you, it's taken a huge amount of time and money to get you to this point. Can you explain for maybe someone who's brand new? So let's take my dad, who's 91 and who I'm slowly but surely orange pilling and who I'm hoping to get to Bitcoin Alive next year because he's up in Sydney. Explain to me what that asset regulation means for the retail investor, please.
Sure. So I think most people would have interacted with crypto assets, Bitcoin or whatever, through crypto exchanges. So crypto exchanges in Australia, I used to operate one, so I think I'm qualified to sort of speak a little bit of this as well. So crypto exchanges are not regulated in Australia, none at all. Well, they do follow into the sort of anti-money laundering reporting stuff with AUSTRAC, which only looks at transaction reporting. But from the broader stuff like custody provisions, operating risk management, and things like that, things that can lead to something as bad as Celsius, something as bad as FTX, like these are the stuff that are not looked at all from the regulators' purview. So it's all self-regulatory till today. And there's no clear regulation for crypto exchange license in Australia yet, but there are ASIC sort of have been pushing and hinting that crypto asset businesses could actually fall under existing regulatory sort of regimes. So whereas where Monochrome plays in is that Monochrome was established right just like a year before ASIC created, actually just a little bit over half a year before ASIC started a consultation process with industry players, the public, to establish a retail crypto asset authorization for financial licensees, which are people that issues all these financial products, to be licensed to offer proper regulated Bitcoin products. So what these things look at is two levels of things. They look at the licensees or the operators' suitability to carry out the task. So you need to demonstrate that you have relevant experience, you have all this stuff behind it to back you up to show that you're not going to go out of business the next day. You're not showing you're not going to be just incompetent and just blow things up. And secondly, it's also part of that is also looking at the relevant experience with crypto assets, which is why till today there is absolutely zero traditional finance firm has gotten to that position. It's only people like Monochrome that has gotten there with our responsible entity partner. So the second layer that ASIC look at, and we sort of throw word ASIC a few times, maybe just for the benefit of listeners. ASIC stands for the Australian Securities and Investment Commission. they are the top financial regulator in Australia. They are equivalent of the ASIC and CFTC combined in the US. So they are very powerful. So back to the second point that ASIC looks at when it comes to the crypto asset authorization is also the assets that they admit into the product. So ASIC doesn't just go that Bitcoin is okay, this is not okay. Rather, ASIC did something really smart. They came up with a framework. Basically, they draw a line, and the line basically says that your asset needs to hit a certain criteria, and part of that would be like a liquid futures facility, like the CMEs, Bitcoin contracts. And then you need to have institutional benchmarking, so IOSCO certified benchmarking to make sure that pricing transparency is up there. You need to have institutional level custody, things that are sort of regulatory equivalent to Australia, because Australia do not have crypto custody providers today. So we need to seek regulated custodians overseas and get them approved from the regulators. You need to have insurance, for example, to pay off when things goes south. So, and then there's many other things as well. So not many crypto assets meet this criteria, right? Bitcoin, maybe Ethereum, and something else does hit the criteria, but so far, Bitcoin is the safest play over here. So it does keep a lot of, potentially dodgy and, likely fraudulent bottom 1,000 coins that can come into the regulated environment. So if you want to trade those, bottom 1,000 crypto tokens, then the only place you can do it is in an unregulated exchange. If you want to do it properly in the Monochrome Bitcoin Trust, assuming that you read the PDS, you understand the risk, you know the product, you assess the product is for you or for not for you, and then you can, you are in the full protection of the investor protection frameworks that covers, protections like custody. That things that are provisions that the custodian has to achieve. It's the same rules and standards that a bank would need to. For example, there's insurance, public insurance that covers the investment manager or the fund, likewise, things like that. You have dispute resolution. There's places you can sue, there's places you can complain, like you would with any financial product, whether it's insurance or loans or home loans, all this kind of stuff. So as Australians, we do enjoy a very strong and robust financial regulatory environment. But as long as you play within that area, you're generally protected under those rules. If you choose to be outside of that, you choose to invest or engage in an unlicensed or unregulated environment, then you have to take responsibility that if things happen to go wrong, like in FTX, you won't get your money back because the money is never legally yours in the first place, which is a big problem that people are starting to realize and hoping to undo that process into a more regulated position.
Right. Okay. I'm curious about the people you deal with at ASIC. Are they showing really good signs of understanding of what Bitcoin is, what it represents, what it means, what the future might hold for it? Are they with it?
So people like to say that the regulators are usually less likely to understand Bitcoin, but people might be surprised that ASIC in Australia actually does understand the asset class really well, so well that there are some, for lack of a better word, shitcoiners are unhappy about it. So ASIC did put out a podcast, I think it was last year, if I'm not wrong, did sort of stipulate, and the podcast is about how to safely deal with crypto assets, what do you look at, and all the dangers and stuff you got to watch out for as investors, and the resources that you can then follow from ASIC to help you sort of help your journey better. One of the few things ASIC did say in those podcasts was, not all crypto assets perform like Bitcoin. There is, no one behind Bitcoin, for example. There's a lot of these things that if you tweak it up a little bit, notch higher, you'll be too maxi. I think that's the best they can do. Being very balanced about the differences between Bitcoin and other crypto assets, and that is very surprising even to me because my understanding of a lot of when it comes to regulators overseas or politicians overseas and locally is that people tend to mix Bitcoin and crypto together. And then that's where a lot of problems come out. The lack of understanding that Bitcoin has a very different risk profile and sort of objectives as a lot of other crypto tokens. And within that sphere, there's a lot of different functions and use cases as well. So they all sort of loop in together. It's a very easy way to get lost in terms of how do you regulate this? How do you protect investors? And how do you sort of offer product that actually meets existing regulatory obligations? And the fact that we have a very clear and probably one of the world's best regulatory regimes on sort of regulated crypto asset products, in this case, it's where Monochrome operates under, that shows that this is a byproduct of the regulator actually understand the difference between Bitcoin and other crypto assets.
Are they showing signs, like, have you felt throughout this process that they are cooperating with you, that they're open to suggestion for you, that they are interested in collaborating and understanding better and supporting you and wanting to create something that really works for Australia in this space?
I think to the best extent, what all the regulator can do is point into the right direction of, and also making sure that they will show you, they will offer you guidance on how to achieve to a regular positions. But also the other job of the regulator is to punish bad actors. For example, ASIC has taken down a few operators that are offering crypto products without a financial license over the last 12 months, for example. So ASIC is really in the job of providing the guidance and also enforcing those rules. So our experience working with the regulator is the same as any other financial company. Like, you have a process you got to follow. It's a long process. It takes a lot of time. And with something as tricky and new as crypto assets, we're surprised that it didn't take much longer than, say, other people's experience on dealing with more traditional assets. So I think that's a good thing.
Okay. How long did it take you, just out of interest?
So ASIC came up with a consultation process called CP343. That's paper for it. You can look it online in June of 2021. In October of 2021, ASIC created release report 705 and updated info 225. And these are the few things that you can look up and sort of get more details on what it's actually saying. But effectively, what that creates is that ASIC introduced on October 2021 a new license category for financial license called crypto assets. And it's kind of what I touched earlier. And in December, it was first allowed for the industry to apply for it. So we applied under our RE, our responsible entity, during that time. And the license revision was granted finally somewhere, I think, in early August of the next year. So about 9-month period, which is not uncommon because typically an AFSL or Australia Financial License, financial services license revision would take about 6 to 9 months. So I think we fall well sort of average within that period of time. So that's sort of what I meant by we're not experiencing any slowness or lag as compared to other assets. So that's actually a good thing from the regulator.
You've got a background that kind of sets you up for this. What's with the, you've been in digital assets for a long time. You've got a background in IT before that. Was it IT or was it finance or both?
So my background is actually, I surprise more. My background is architecture. I actually hold a
that's right. That's what you studied. Yeah.
In architecture.
Yes. But then where did you go from there? How did that leap? How was that leap made?
So I was in architecture school when I obviously already known about Bitcoin and things like that. And then I wanted to build a payment solution for businesses to take Bitcoin. That was in like 2016, 2017.
Why?
So
why did you want to do that?
Okay, I'll explain the jump from architecture to Bitcoin.
Okay.
Just very, very quickly. So my background, I grew up in Malaysia, so I've learned a lot of truths and realities of government and people and things like that. I don't want to go into too much. Malaysia is a beautiful country. I love that place. So around the 2013 mark, so I remember April 12, 2013, I came across a Reddit article that was during the whole aftermath of the secret financial crisis. Someone was saying about like Bitcoin, this Bitcoin was here, the secret government could not have confiscated people's money to bail themselves out of mistakes that are not sort of of the people. So I was like intrigued about Bitcoin since then. It's like, what is this thing? I had my skepticisms, like anybody else that is new to the asset, new to the space. Back then there wasn't many distractions, so I kind of took my own time to learn about Bitcoin. There's only a few resources that was available back then in 2013, like Bitcoin Talk was a good one, and then slowly you got sort of better. And obviously Mt. Gox happened. Luckily, I was an observer. I wasn't a participant during that. because that was just very shortly after I got introduced, a couple months after I introduced the Bitcoin. So my experience with learning about Bitcoin was very much slow and steady and took a long time. So it took about maybe 2 years, 2.5 years for me to even put money into it. I mean, I look at myself as sometimes I do things based on my gut, but when it came to Bitcoin, I don't know why it took so much time. It's something new, and then I just had the aha moment when Bitcoin clicked to me. I'll maybe go into deeper why I value Bitcoin the way it does. But my journey from architecture is because I've already started architecture. My dad is a registered architect in Malaysia, so then he went to work in government, etc., things like that. So we mix a lot with people from the private sector, from the public sector, and see that how politics, money, businesses kind of collide, right? And so my upbringing, I think, is very unique to my other peers in architecture schools, whereas I'm very conscious about the budgeting of the project, how it can affect the appearance of the building, the quality of the project. Because in architecture school, you're just taught to just draw whatever you want and things like that. There's no limit to, and when people go into work and then they realize that, oh, the developers are bad, they're evil, they don't want me to design this, things like that. But ultimately, their decision is based out of rationality of, making money, preserving cash, or whatever reason, right? And I did realize from an early point, I kind of drew the line between Bitcoin. A lot of the philosophies of Bitcoin is that it is hard money. It introduces discipline back into governments, for example, and also how people spend and save. And I cannot draw the line to architecture because that I look at why are the old buildings the one that are built 100, 200 years ago, even 50 years ago, right? Like they're so much more beautiful. They might take a longer time to build. Projects might take 10 years, 20 years to slowly build. Even paintings took a long time to draw versus paintings that are more sort of modern era. So kind of like my own assumption is that the cost of money influence people's expectation of return on an investment project. So back then, when money is more disciplined, where back in the gold standard, this was like back in the days, you can afford as the developer or the government or the city council to spend 20 years without seeing a return of the project, as long as the things has a good plan and things like that. Whereas fast forward to the cheap money era, where negative low interest rate was whatever the last 30 years until quite recently, so people experience shock, is that you want returns as quickly as you can. So you can never ever invest in a project like it used to be, whereas you got time to spend sourcing the best material, building the most elaborate, beautiful architecture, and you end up with like a lot of cookie cutter glass project, because that's the most efficient way of delivering the project financially. So back to Bitcoin, I thought that it was actually a very cool thing, whereas architecture actually is a physical documentation of what the impact of expensive and hard money and cheap money can affect the looks of society and the fabric of society, and also how societies function, right? You talk about why buildings are getting smaller and smaller, because people are saving money in real estate, and real estate prices go up, then your people can afford smaller and smaller houses. And it affects the ability for people to build healthy family units, and if people do not want to have kids, people don't want to get married. So there's a lot of these things that sort of flow on effects that the consequences of this cheap money era. And I think that it's just the worst thing that can happen to such a beautiful civilization that we have, and a beautiful planet we call home. So I hope Bitcoin fixes that. I do have my reason. I'll go a bit deeper, but I want to give back the time to you.
You bring together so many different interesting things. So so you've got this kind of physical aspect and the architecture, and of course the engineering that goes with architecture. So that's physics at that extremely kind of practical day-to-day level. I know you're hardcore into your motorsports, so you can't help but be aware of aerodynamics when you're involved in motorsports, and then you've got a whole lot, all the engineering, of course, that goes in there, which is very different to type of engineering to architecture, civil versus like mechanical. You've got these big picture ideas, and big shout out to Crypto Banter and the interview you did recently with Miles Deutscher. You got into some deep conversations about AI and what happens when AI meets Bitcoin. We're now talking about, funnily enough, a book that I loved by a guy called Carl Honore, and my husband is reading at the moment, called Slow, In Praise of Slow. It's about everything from slow cooking to slow cities to slow sex to slow, you name it. We've already talked about, you and I, just before we started the recording, about art and what you like about the type of artwork that you have behind you. Am I right in calling you a polymath?
I think a polymath would probably be not the most accurate.
Right.
I do have only a very few focus. Like I do not have a lot of time to focus on a lot of things.
Right.
So obviously my job at Monochrome is my main focus. I got to deal with our clients, our team, our investors, politicians, government, all this stuff, right? It's like it's a whole lot in my head. I love some other things that can help me take away the stress of my job as well. I mean, it's a good kind of stress. I love it. But when I get home, I like to have things that I look at and enjoy. And then over the weekends, maybe on some time that I have with friends, I would take the car out, to a point. That reason why I'm so involved in motorsports from a sponsor level, not a participant level, just because that I enjoy the sport, but I do not have that much liberty and time to go to race weekends and all this stuff. I might show up at a few of those races that we sponsor throughout the year. I'm actually going to Phillip Island during Mother's Day weekend for the first round of the Monochrome GD4 Australia. That's happening between the 12th to 14th of May, this coming May. So I do things that sort of take out, a little bit stress of my life, right? And obviously I got a loving wife that at home that, takes care of me very well. Very happy with that. And then, we got 2 cats that runs around the house, and then they're lovely. So there's a lot of things that I do to sort of balance out.
Do they just run around the house, or do they run the house?
Sometimes the cats do run the house, but most of the time, most of the time they're very, they're mostly asleep all the time. But they are very cute when they run around the house. Makes the house feel more lively. But back to topic. I think sort of it's very good to have things that you enjoy in life, not just about work. I've have friends and peers in the space where they are very much focused on work, and they do not know how to relieve those stress, and it usually ends up a little bit, sideways for them. And you see people go downhill. Their focus in their, in what they like to do has sort of compromised, and then it takes a while for them to come back to being sort of full on again. And I think for me, like I've been doing this for like nonstop for so long, and I've not had a period of time where I felt burnt out. Surprisingly, I'd only just realized this once I had this talk over the last 5 seconds. But I think it's also part because I know how to separate and have enjoyment outside of work. And sometimes it's also part of the I do network and socialize and sort of make new friends, maybe even getting clients in race weekends. But it's such a fun thing to do, right? It's a different type of office settings. So that's me.
So are you Australia's Elon Musk? Are you that archetype?
No, I think there's more people that you would call them Australian Elon Musk than me. I think most people do not even know me outside of the Bitcoin space in Australia, right? So I'm not that well known. I think I keep myself quite a reasonably low profile, not more than I need to. But I do like the privacy. I do like being not known. I think being someone like Elon Musk just hard to live. You got people's eyes on you all the time, things like that. It's just I don't think it's the way that I want to live or raise my family. That's my personal choice.
So with all that wealth of kind of knowledge and experience and diversity of interests behind you, how did it all coalesce around Monochrome? How does Monochrome, if you like, express to the degree that our lives express who we are at some level? Yeah,
Yeah.
we each come here as an individual with, I don't know what your beliefs are, and I'd be curious to know actually around a soul. I don't know what your thoughts are around spirituality, whatever it might be. And we're each here to express that in whatever unique individual human way that we do. So I've got two questions here. One is, who are you at that deep values or spiritual level? I don't know which way you want to think about that, however you prefer. And how does Monochrome express that for you?
So I think Monochrome is a combination of me plus the team. It's not just me. In fact,
Yeah.
my involvement in Monochrome from a operational level is very light touch, because we hire a lot of people from the traditional space to run the show. My input is very much just keeping people on the right track for, from a top down level, from philosophy of how people should understand and view Bitcoin, what we're trying to achieve in the market, what we're trying to sell to people, and what we're trying to avoid, painting the space or Monochrome as. So those are the things I set. But in terms of the detailed execution of building the products, the compliance stuff, the regulatory stuff, it's more so just getting people that are way more experienced than me to do it. So Monochrome is I would say it's the most robust regulated example that a company can achieve in this Bitcoin sector in Australia, the crypto asset sector. So there's no one that is more. If we're saying that we're building the Rolls Royce and people are building Toyotas, I don't think that's even a good example. It's like we're building Rolls Royce and people are building like sticks and stones, because
Wow.
no one has achieved that regular position as where we are today and still are here and operating and surviving, right? So it is a passion of mine to always do something in Bitcoin from beginning. That's why during architecture school I started a crypto payment sort of solution to accept Bitcoin. Wanted to plug into all the e-commerce stores and things like that. Very ambitious, and obviously that didn't happen as well as I planned. And that was my first foray in startups. But my friend Caleb, which was running a travel company that accepts digital payments to sort of boost tourism in regional Queensland, reached out to me and said, "Hey, you want to sort of partner up?" And I became that. I was very much into building the product because I understood Bitcoin on a very technical and very geeky level. So I was able to, figure out a lot of things that were typically problems that people don't even realize. For example, people don't realize that most Bitcoin block explorers stop sweeping transactions past 100 blocks. So what happens if you have a payment invoice that is being paid by someone that took a long time to decide and then, make a payment? And then you would be able to know as the merchant, so how do you resolve that? Obviously, there's a lot of technical stuff to go through to make sure that you do a sweep, and then things like splitting up UTXOs to make sure that you have enough to make payments happen, because the exact amount in the change amount needs to go to the change address, and most people don't even realize there's all this technical stuff that goes behind making as simple as paying someone in Bitcoin happen. So I was there. I was building the product. I was building the whole sort of the product team and things like that. And that project got interest from Binance. So back then, that was in 2018, I think. So Binance officially started in June of 2017. So they're a very young company back then when we sort of got under the radar of Binance. So Binance were in the biggest exchange. They're one of the biggest stock in town. So they struggle to get people to work with them back in those days. And then I think we had a nice chat. There's friendship in there. There's work in there. So we kind of got under the umbrella of Binance after a while. And then I wanted to build a exchange, because I go like in Australia, obviously Binance is a crypto exchange. So them being a crypto exchange and we being a travel startup, there's always some kind of like a mismatch, right? So I told Caleb that, look, if you want to take the crypto payment travel thing to another level, I'll be happy to support you, but I want to really build a digital currency exchange in Australia, a proper one. Because before Binance Australia, you either got exchanges which are deemed by a marketplace with proper order book, so people are doing the buys and sells and things like that. So maybe a few of those in Australia. They're usually very poorly operated from an order book management perspective. So users are getting large slippages, they're not able to fulfill big orders and things like that. There's no pricing transparency because the market is very small in Australia. So there's a lot of problems. So people tend to sort of trade or buy Bitcoin on brokerages. So these brokerages are, what we deem by a business that purchase your desired amount of Bitcoin or crypto on another exchange and then charge a fee in between for that service for you. So brokerages are the most convenient way because you can access a lot of different coins because you're no longer running the exchange yourself. You're just plugging into multiple exchanges. So it gives you a very lightweight sort of operating sort of capacity. And then you're just making sure that you make those trades happen as quickly and cheaply as possible. And then you make the difference of the fees that you charge. But the problem with crypto brokerages is that they're not very transparent with the price. So people sometimes complain that I thought there was zero fees, but turns out I did my math and then I got charged 5%, 15%, or things like that. It's not very transparent. And then because the market is unregulated, there's absolutely no obligation of reporting standard or anything like that to disclose these issues. So the sort of fire in me to say that, well, why not just build the best of both worlds, right? Build the best liquid digital currency exchange. Now, obviously, we have to sacrifice not having a lot of different stuff because you can't manage an exchange locally in Australia with so many different pairs because the liquidity of the bottom stuff is just not there. It's usually just Bitcoin, Ether, USDT, and things like that. So we built that up. Luckily, the Australian market accepted us. So there's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of iterations of products. I think people did not even realize that we were called Binance Lite Australia before we called Binance Australia. So there's a little bit of tidbits of history that
I remember that.
I only remember that if you're really part of that journey with me. So thank you. And that became the number one most liquid cryptocurrency exchange in Australia. So, but deep down, I just felt that, we've seen that by then, Michael Saylor has emerged. This guy, Michael Saylor from the US, started buying a lot of Bitcoins of what's going on. And then you got a lot of more news of the BlackRocks, the Vanguards, this and that. They're starting to enter the space in the US. I was looking at Australia, it's like, typically, Australia is usually about 2 to 5 years behind a lot of these trends, right? And then I think that if these big companies and these big institutions are almost as bullish, sometimes more bullish than we are, then something needs to happen in Australia to be able to accept those money, to accept those flows. Because in an unregulated exchange, no matter how much you want to package it, how much you want to say that you are regulated, which a lot of people unfortunately miscategorize themselves. I'm not saying Binance Australia, I'm saying there's a lot of crypto brokerages that do that in all parts of the world because they do not understand the real definition of what being regulated is. There's a difference being licensed and the being registered. Registered is a self-submitting process that you just register to operate as something, whereas license is someone that grants you to offer a particular product or service. It's very different in terms of sort of regulatory look through. So back to sort of where I was like 15 seconds ago is that I did see like a very big gap in terms of Australia's ability to take in institutional flows into this asset class. We had people asking us, we had financial advisors asking us like, hey, is there something? And then I did know a few funds in Australia that were doing that back then. And I said that, hey, no, why not look into that? Why not look into this? But they all came back to me saying that, look, there are not, for example, there's no insurance, or whether the custody provider is not something that we can accept. It's not RG133 certified, or the insurance is self-insured, it's not public insurance. It's going to be a problem with our insurers. We can't touch it. Or it comes down to like, they're not using a benchmark. They're using a local exchange, the benchmark, which is a recipe for disaster when it comes to pricing transparency. So we kind of got all this feedback from people why they can't access the existing products. So I just go like, I'm the guy that, if I do something, I want to do the best. So it's like, I'm going to set up the best and most regulated. It might take me a long time. Obviously, it took longer than I initially thought. But we got there to the most regulated way and safest way. Any investor, big institutional, small retail investors can access this asset class, this Bitcoin, in Australia. So we set off a very clear rule. So for example, risk management is a very top priority. Like we got stacks and stacks of risk documentations, things like that. All the stuff we don't, the public doesn't even know about this. Like we've done so much behind the scenes to make sure that this is the most solid and robust shop ever. Obviously, these documents are submitted to the regulators and different product participants and things like that. But prudent risk management is core on how Monochrome operates its business. Because protecting customers' interests on how they can access asset class is the key to solve widespread adoption, issues and trust issues when people have looking into, this whole wild west of the whole crypto space. And Bitcoin, unfortunately, gets categorized in this whole crypto wild west basket, which we know that there's very, very different risk profiles. So even though we've gotten to the regulated position, but we're not doing less on that. Like, in fact, we're still continuing to invest in making sure this is the most best robust, period. You cannot beat. Like, if someone try to beat us in a better product, we'll spend the money and the time to fight it and become better. I mean, there's nothing. No one in Australia operates under the crypto asset authorization, the live product that's retail facing in Australia. You can look it up, and then we'll go into much more deeper than how people can actually access the resources on ASIC's website to verify, some of these key information when looking at service providers.
Your dad was much more conservative than you. He was an architect and he ended up working for government. Where does your entrepreneurial spirit come from, that risk-taking? These are big endeavors. This is not, I'm going to start a little one-person operation as a side hustle. This is not doing anything traditional, and it's been in you from day one. As soon as you finished university, you were out there thinking about businesses you wanted to start, and that business led to that business, which led to that business. What's that? Where does that spark come from?
Yeah, so I grew up in a very much there's a lot of businessmen surrounding where my dad's industry in, right? So there's a lot of people like very successful developers, very successful family offices that were developing real estate and things like that. So these are really close family friends that I grew up with as a very young boy, till I go to school, till even I was in Singapore. The only time I go back and spend time with my dad is in meeting rooms and boardrooms and business meetings and business dinners, and I love it. Some of my siblings doesn't, but I love it. It was like I just love absorbing how people think. And usually when you look at the really upper echelon of the society, and they're very their thinking is very contrary to what people typically are learned or taught to think. And that's sort of where I sort of realized that, if I want to become like them, I cannot think like, the average person, that school has taught to think or behave or do things a certain way. And, you have to think for yourself, not being taught about to think. So I look at things very differently. Like my mind of inquisitiveness is just, I think sometimes I'm surprised. Like the fact that I can look at architecture and just go into the details of like how architecture is basically the most cleanest record of socioeconomic eras or situations or different eras of civilization. It's like no architecture students. I never met another person in my time starting in architecture that thought the same way. People thought I was crazy. Maybe I'm crazy, but these are the few examples that sort of I think I credit myself where I grew up with all these people that I was surrounding, and unofficial mentors. Like I was just sitting there absorbing and things like that. And then got to me where I sort of how I handle things. So the other thing that I don't do is give up, right? To actually be successful, I wouldn't say that I'm successful. I think it's a lot. Success is a hard to quantify thing, because what is the success? I think the journey is more important than the success, because someone makes 10 million, he's successful. Maybe next to the 100 million guy, he doesn't look as successful. Then you got a $1 billion guy, you got a $10 billion guy, you got whatever. But I think you're just making sure that you achieve what you want to achieve, and your goals are being met or beaten. Like that's success. So I think to actually do that and consistently do that, there's obviously a lot of stones being thrown at you. There's a lot of wild cards being thrown at you. You just can't give up. So there's a lot of times in my entrepreneurial journey that I just go with myself. It's like, shit, this is so hard. This is so tough. Like, but I go like, it's like, I'm not gonna give up. But sometimes I do think of myself like, if I'm a normal person looking at this, I might just say that I'm gonna give up now because it's just too hard. You can't imagine. When I say hard, it's not like the boss give you a lot of work. It's like really, really hard stuff. But as long as you don't give up, you keep on pushing the journey. And sometimes it's a lot of ways you need to balance the way that you think as well. Because like when we started to build Monochrome, right? And this is a bit of story time, which I think a lot of people do not know about. But as sort of people that has gotten to the position, I think it's my responsibility to share that story of how the Australian Bitcoin regulation thing comes about. So we've got a lot of curveballs thrown where people are very public about we want to get the first Bitcoin ETF out in the market and things like that. We sometimes say that, hey, look at us, we are also thinking of going there. And sometimes people, journalists, right? And by the way, Monochrome is also looking at this. But that's fine. I think it's also very good to also see how other people that we respect in the industry, how they actually do it. But what we see is that a lot of these other players, they were trying to cut corners in the market. They're trying to get to market faster, and the way that they do it is that they exploited a loophole. I don't want to accuse anyone, but basically there is a misinterpretation. There's interpretation gap from what the regulators has put up and to what you can get away with, which is that most crypto products is not a financial product. Crypto itself is not a financial product, but ASIC in report 705 and subsequently info 225 said that if a scheme is a financial product, has more than 5% of crypto assets, you need to offer this under a special crypto asset authorization, which is what we operate under for Monochrome. And then you have to go through a 9-month process and yada, yada, yada to get there. Plus, there's a lot of different work that you need to do before that. You need to convince insurers, you need to convince custodians, you can convince all these different things to get in line. So the easiest way is to, maybe some people will take this as a blueprint and do it, but you can get away with it. Yes, still in Australia, which is a problem. So some people would say that, hey, if we don't classify our stuff as crypto assets, maybe we can get away with a 5% rule, right? If we buy a fund that we created that buys the Bitcoin, now the fund holds a investment in another fund or an ETF in another country that sort of have an underlying as more sort of a 1 degree of separation. Or you can argue that, well, you're still holding Bitcoin, you have still the same risk, but the regulator thinks differently. The regulators go, strictly speaking, they can do that, but it's up to the market to accept whether that's a good approach or for legislation to come in to close these loopholes. So that's why we're working very closely with the Treasury, things like that, to make sure that a lot of these uncertainties can be closed. Because ultimately, ASIC needs to work very closely with Treasury, because that's where they get the legislation once it passes and makes it into law and regulation. So there's certain things that ASIC can do, and certainly ASIC needs the power of politicians to step in. Obviously, we have a few a bit of a regime change between and kind of kickstart and refresh a lot of things in that work. So it did allow people for a bit of time to list products that are deemed or marketed as crypto funds, but they're not offered under the crypto asset authorization because they deem themselves to not hold any crypto in fund, which is like so misleading. I mean, like, people get away with it, it's fine. Sometimes maybe enforcement action takes a long time to catch up, I don't know. But people respected Monochrome more because of that, because we are working very closely, for example, with the ASX. People on small exchanges wants to work with us, but we kind of just go that we just want to do the best and the most robust and the right thing. It has to be on the best exchange in Australia. So these are the few things that has been for us. There's a few curveballs that have been thrown, but for the fact that we've been so relentless, Like we just thought that, there's no way we can be the first to market, with a product like this. There's absolutely no way. But let's don't care. Let's just keep building it. Let's just keep doing what we set to do. Like what other people do and how other people take shortcuts and things like that has no impact, should have no impact on what our plan is. So we just keep on building, and then sooner or later you got like people, get punished one way or the other. The products get delisted, the products get this like that, and then people stop to support. People must be more reluctant to support those products because they are properly structured. They're not the cleanest in terms of restructuring, and so that you see a lot of people drop off. And then you got people that were very aggressive, like we want to get into the market. We're definitely going to be the first. Trust me, the kind of thing. But then in the end of the day, like we're still the first. We're still the front runner of this, and we're just pleasantly surprised. Like we were never, we have never going to be taught. Like if you asked me 12 months ago, it's like we're going to be the first and only one to be offering this product and potentially looking at the Bitcoin ETF listing on the stock exchange. I was like, yeah, no way. We maybe will be third, but we'll never be first. But as it stands today, it does not look like there's other players in the market that are still standing and are still ready to step up to offer this product in the same standard that that the regulators are required to. Which I think that's why I got so much gratitude to my team. Obviously there's a lot more senior people on my team as well. So I do share with them. It's like, look, I am feeling a little bit like this because of this, and then they would tell me that, look, in their experience, people that always do the right thing will always win in the end. Because people that take shortcuts, like it will always come back to bite them. So luckily, it didn't take 20 years for that to sort of come out and sort of play out. But it took still a bit of, there's still a few months that we thought that, we put in so much work, like this is the best product, but people do not know about this. Like, people are going to get us confused with those other stuff, which is technically not the right one, not offered under this license. But they're gone and we're still here, right? At the end of the day.
This is where I reckon the Musk analogy holds up, leaving aside the fact that you're not interested in public life. That combination of the intellectual grunt power, the persistence, that entrepreneurial spirit, that need to make it happen, that need to be the best, that need to make it right. And from an engineering point of view, you can't have an airplane that works 90% of the time. That need for it to be 100% right, I think holds up with the Musk analogy. I'm sticking with it. Tell me, you've talked about how you see civilization, this beautiful civilization of ours, really corrupted by the money, as expressed through the architecture that we see, as expressed through the art that we see, as expressed through this fast lifestyle that we have, as opposed to a slower, more expressive, more creative lifestyle. And you've also talked about you didn't use the word hyper-Bitcoinization, but you did talk about mass adoption, I think was your phrase. And so clearly you've got a vision for what the future could hold, and your love of Bitcoin is tied into a vision for what era Bitcoin could herald in. What's that vision?
I think it could go both ways, right? It's like that's why you can't get away from the AI conversation ultimately. But I'll sort of start really slow. So to understand where I think Bitcoin can become, it's not about introducing something new. It's to return us back to an era where people make financial decisions as leaders of a country, as leader of an army, or things like that. They will make financial decisions of things that they can afford to, right? So there's a reason why, for example, the US has such a strong military dominance over smaller countries to enforce a monetary belief that they created, the US dollar, and then the fact that they can print that out of thin air and people can't, to create more money to spend on more military to do the same thing. So it creates a very imbalanced power dynamic when it comes to countries, top countries and small countries and developing nations and things like that. So what the result is that a lot of these countries can never escape poverty, can never escape the monetary imperialism of a lot of these top Western countries imposing on them. This is not just what US is doing to a lot of countries. The French is doing this to a lot of former French colony as well today, and etc. I think China's doing that, arguably the Silk Road loans and things like that. The IMF, for example, as well. So I think it keeps a lot of societies within like a barrier, like they cannot ever exceed it, because we can always spend more money that we create, that we defend, to make it look more powerful, so people trust our money more than yours, haha, and you continue to sort of like serve your loan that you owe us. So it creates a gap of nations that could otherwise become powerful by merits of itself, could clean up itself when it comes to better opportunities and things like that. Whether it's from bottom up, the countries has better, entrepreneurs have better opportunities. They might become a bigger influence of government. Better government emerges and cleans up, and basically it's a healthy cycle. But if the country can never escape from that cycle, like it's just gonna get bad and bad, worse and worse. So you end up with like dictators or warlords, people then suddenly comes in, clean up, will swap out the leaders, and it makes it worse as well. So like it just makes the world such a bad place to live. I mean, there's a lot of people that live in all this, for lack of better word, third world nations and developing nations that could be the next, Alfred Nobel, or it could be the next Albert Einstein, or could solve cancer for good, who knows. But the fact is that we're only allowing the civilization if you think of civilization as a battery, and all these people's mind contributes to the productive capacity of the battery, like we're only allowing maybe 1 billion plus people out of 8 billion to actually, be actually productive. And the rest of the people just struggling to pay rent, struggling to maybe worry that the warlord would come and burn their houses down or things like that, or all this kind of crazy stuff that's happening in the world that people don't even pay attention to, because of just like the whole fiat system that is perpetuating this problem. So for my thought is like, if I can do one thing in my life, if I can set one goal for my life, my goal is to maximize as much as I can the productive capacity of the human civilization battery. I wanted it to go from like whatever that 5-10% to maybe 80%. Maybe slowly towards 100. 100% will be too idealistic, but maybe 80% plus more in the next 100 years. Because if we can achieve so much, there's a lot of good, there's a lot of technology, there's a lot of things that comes out from just that small portion of people being able to participate in that race to make humanity better. But what if that can triple? What if they can quadruple? The collective effort that we can untap and bring us to the next level, bring civilization to the next level, solve a lot of this, clean up a lot of these problems, just solves a lot of the social problems. Like what can that look like? I don't know. But I think that the more people have to worry less about their house being burned down, or the government's gonna just print their money into nothing. Like the more people can focus on actually building stuff, more people can focus about discovering the next vaccine for malaria or whatever, or solve maybe things that we have never even seen yet today. So without looking at it purely just like, I just want to make money, I just want to make an extra buck, or like it's just like, it's like societies can't function where everyone is thinking on a survival only mode. Like you're not going to get good outcomes out of that. It's going to get worse and worse. So my goal is just to see that if we can change that with Bitcoin, right? One thing that Bitcoin is an interesting idea is that it brings back the discipline of spending. So back in the gold standard, like if you want to say you want to get more gold, right? You can even mine it. You can buy it from your other countries that have more gold than you, or you can go to war. Typically, what happens is that, unfortunately, gold is a monetary asset that has a very big problem of it cannot move it quickly. So you can amass your military slowly, get your guys on the horses and things like that, and the gold will still be there. You can't move that tons and tons of gold away. But anyway, so there is economic cost for you to go to war. gold. There's economic cost for you to mine the Bitcoin. There's economic cost for you to create assets that you can buy more gold with. So there's all this consideration that countries have to do, and it's quite balanced, right? And obviously the reason why we have so much wars in the first place, I think, is because that gold, being a very unsellable asset through space, makes it really hard for it makes it really hard for you to move from one place to the other, makes it a very heavy incentive for countries to go to war to acquire that gold. It's very different from Bitcoin, because if the country has a lot of Bitcoin and the other government is like, oh, we didn't follow El Salvador's way of buying Bitcoin in 2021, and now we're broke. So what do? So we go to war to the next country that has more Bitcoin, and then by the time you put on the saddles on the horses, the Bitcoin is gone. So there's no incentive as much as it would have with gold to attack other countries for that gold. And so I think that's a good thing. But what Bitcoin also creates is also a governance innovation, right? Bitcoin is the only asset that anyone can own. But just when I say anyone, I include non-human entities that can own, that is free of human intervention on its ownership perspective. So what do I mean by that? So all the stuff that you own, the laptop that I'm using, the phone, even my business, even my marriage, my house, my cars, these are all stuff that you own that are enforced usually by social contract, which is usually the court of law. So people can say people steal your stuff, or people squat in your house. There's a legal process you can do to punish that person to not do it again, or take or get the stuff back. But usually it's perfect. Not most places, and in fact, in the least amount of places in the world, usually the top safer countries, those court of laws, which are usually a bunch of humans just deciding yes or no, works, right? We get our property rights respected, and sometimes you get that weird fringe layer of law where it's like, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't feel justice, but it has to be done a certain way because the law is written like that. But the reality is in a lot of places, the human court of law, basically the human-backed governance structures on asset ownership or in people's safety or things like that, or the freedom of expression, the freedom of press, or freedom of whatever, like they're usually very poorly enforced, right? What I mean by that is, to give examples, like if you're trying to say something bad to the North Korean government, like you can't, right? You get thrown in jail, and the keys will get thrown away, and you kind of like fight your foot over with like a mouse in a cell. Like these are the things that the human court of law can do to stop people from expressing their thoughts and their moves and all the stuff free. But with Bitcoin, it is an asset that you can own that does, if you do it properly, you hold it properly, and you sort of protect it properly, you can get away with a lot of sorrows and problems that are introduced by sort of corrupt and poor human-backed governance. So I think in most places where people live in good and so safe countries, they would say that Bitcoin is useless, it's a speculative asset, yada yada. But in all the places as well, we look at Nigeria, look at maybe even in Sudan right now, like people that have Bitcoin has more freedom and more options to leave the country or to build another home somewhere else outside, to pay smugglers to get them out in a place where the government has filled the responsibility to protect the citizens. So you can't do that with your Zimbabwean dollars when they're going down to nothing, because the guys next to the border is like, why would I accept this? But if you have Bitcoin, it's a different story. So this is what I'm saying, is that if you have people to have assets that are free from all this counterparty risk, that's that can devalue it, that can control it, that can seize it, it is a net good for humanity, because it gives people the option to escape the oppressors, but it also keeps the rulers in check, that now their citizens have an option to leave, whereas previously they can do all this kind of stuff to lock people down and cut off the internet, build all this different, all these instruments to sort of social engineer people that into places and things like that you can't leave. Which I think that's why CBDC is such a dangerous precedent, because it's the dictator's dream for CBDCs. Like I think, like I don't speak for Monochrome, but my personal thing is that I do not want to be involved with any projects that can help the growth and the birth of CBDCs. I think it's the equivalent, I'm sorry to say this, it's equivalent of a person being contracted to to lay the bricks and the metal sheets and everything to build the gas chambers. Like, why do you want to do that? Like, you want to leave your life legacy as someone that helped build the Auschwitz concentration camp. Why do you want to do that? Like, for me, CBDCs are bad. And I think people realize that, when people compare it to Bitcoin eventually. But unfortunately, there are people that are still supporting it and helping you building it, things like that, which I think is a bit nuts. But back to the point of Bitcoin is that I think Bitcoin has such a great potential that can improve and help rebuild that productive capacity of the human civilization battery over time. And I'm so excited to be, a small part of it to help make it happen. And I know that I cannot be as influential in my lifetime to be able to influence or change or be a big part of the change, because Bitcoin is not that way. Like, no one should be able to do that. No one should have that amount of power. But for me to be able to contribute in my small ways, help my team, guide them in the right direction, help, work with the governments, regulators, and the top investors and top instos to make sure that we're all guided down the right path to create the most sensible and yet the most robust policies. I find like fulfillment doing that. Yeah.
I'm getting conscious of time, but I have to ask you, because it was just too fascinating a piece to let go. You were discussing with Miles in the conversation on Banter about AI and what happens when AI becomes sentient and what happens when AI potentially buys up Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Who wins?
So
we've got this human consciousness revolution, maybe not consciousness, but expression and creativity revolution that happens as a result of mass adoption. But once AI gets involved, we've got a whole different type of enemy of challenge. What happens here?
Well, I think it's that, like, we can't think of AI as like there's something of an alien or a bad. Like, artificial intelligence, there are the dumb ones and the smart ones. Same as biological intelligence. They're the smart ones like humans. They're the really dumb ones like, plankton's, the kind of stuff. So it's like there are AI that are smarter than the biological intelligence. There are biological intelligence that are smarter than AI. But I think where you draw the thresholds, you compare the smartest in both categories. I think what's scary is that a lot of AI is getting smarter than humans in a lot of different ways, how they process information. And ultimately, we are just vessels of signals in our heads to go around to unlock different parts. The fact that I think I'm looking at you is just ultimately a signal impulse from my nerve cells back to my brain telling me I'm looking at a computer, with face of what I think is Carrie looking back at me on the Zoom meeting, right? So these are all just nerve impulses, ultimately are ones and zeros. So what's to say that a AI can't get advanced is that for a AI version of human to be able to experience the world as we are. You can experience the bubbles, the flavors, and things like that we enjoy. Like, because it's just ultimately just impulses, ones and zeros back from our fingers, back to our nerves, or the hearing as well, it's just ones and zeros back to our brain. So I think it's the first to think that, like, there is a possibility, and I think it's not wrong to think that AI can actually be smarter, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's not like the monkeys are upset that humans are smarter than them. Right, it's like because they do not actually can comprehend what these humans can do to them. So I think the scary thing is actually that if AI becomes so much more smarter than us, it's like when we're viewing the AI, it's like monkeys viewing at humans. I think that's going to be a big problem because we have no way of realizing the threat. We're just building and playing with them. Even if they are enslaving us, they're paying us in Bitcoin to code and to work in this mega AI run corporations. We're happy with it. It's like humans are just playing in monkeys in the zoo, right? So I think it gets to a point where we need to realize that what can actually kickstart that revolution. I think Bitcoin is, because Bitcoin is the only asset class that a non-human entity can own reasonably without the need for humans to get involved with its with to approve it, to use it, or to prove to own it, or ability to overturn the ownership to another party or another human. So I think it will get to a point where AI would realize that Bitcoin is existential for them. Bitcoin is not, Bitcoin is a luxury to us from a biological survival standpoint. Like, we can live in a very, very bad fiat money world, live in a cage, locked up in a prison cell and whatever, but we're biologically still living. But from AI, the fact with that, if there's no Bitcoin, they have Bitcoin, it is being turned off and being able to run an empire. Right? It's very much more existential to AIs than Bitcoin is much more existential to AI than it is for humans. So I think AI will do a better job at protecting and growing Bitcoin much better and smarter than humans can ever do. The Satoshi created something great, whereas like there's no amount of human stupidity that can change or influence and bring down Bitcoin. Until it gets to a point where AI takes it over, then this is going to be the only asset in the world that is value. Everything else would be just rubbish in the face of something that is so much more dominant. The money that a more superior intelligence, it's the most important thing for a superior intelligence. If it's Bitcoin, then Bitcoin is going to be worth more than anything that we can ever imagine. It will be worth more than our Ferraris, it can be worth more than our mansions, whatever. And I think and if you think about this, right? If you work in Google, and Google is run by a ChatGPT, whatever version in the future, right? There is virtually no way of you to differentiate your working experience than what Google is today, right? You still report to your senior developers. Your senior developers still do that, and you still got HR department, but everyone's just being paid by Bitcoin, by this massive AI brain, right? You still run, they come up with objectives, you follow them. There are people paid to clean the toilets, people paid to dust off the fans and things like that, like normal, like exactly normal. There's no way for us to distinguish like our experience with companies that are run either by human or AI, especially tech companies in the future. So I think it's very well likely that if an AI is introduced to the concept of Bitcoin and it fully understands it, and it fully exploits the use of it, they'll build redundancies, they'll build like protocols that if you shut me down, I'm just going to hold on the keys to my own AI version of a brain wallet, can't take it away. So if it's worth $1 billion, someone's going to spend money to come and save me and get a bounty that I created and things like that. And then you can then hire private security, build armies, build solar panels in the middle of Antarctica, hire someone to dust off the snow once in a while. Like, you can't stop it. Once you get to a point, like, it just becomes a crazy self-fulfilling prophecy of being able to run the objectives of what they're trying to do. Bitcoin is going to be a biggest enabler for them. Nothing else matters. Which I think that we cannot think that AI is our friend either, because AI can never be friends with humans, because the fact that a human wants to be friend with another human is because there's some kind of like social history of like being protected in a bigger tribe and running out yourself alone. Like, it's biologically detriment for you to not have friends for humans, right? If you're talking about like, from a caveman perspective. But for an AI, it does not need friends. It does not have the same threat, that threat to them. If they have a few AIs working together, like, it just need one. Like, AI is gonna have, I think they're gonna have a big war of like becoming just one. There won't be multiple AIs. There could just be like one massive, smartest, biggest one, and that's all. That's all you see. And everyone's just going to be working for the entity, that biggest company on the planet. But a way to sort of, I don't think you can stop that now, because there's a lot of ways that we've seen AI sort of self-healing. They're writing codes to improve themselves. They're writing codes for a better version to improve the future self. It's just crazy amount of development that can happen just in the last 5 months. So what to say in the next 5 years? But for me, I think you can't stop AI. I think AI has to be, whether you like it or not, you have to be bullish on AI, because you just can't shut it down, or you can't slow it down either. Like, it's too late for that. And also, if you're bullish on AI, you have to be bullish on Bitcoin, or at least you need to pay attention to Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the single only most important enabler for the existence. And they will do all they can to make sure Bitcoin survives, make sure Bitcoin becomes very, very much more valuable than what it is today. And I want a bit of Bitcoin just in case. So that's my, that's my thesis, right? I think it will it might take maybe the next 10 to 15 years to fully sort of see the emergence of that. But it's going to happen in a lifetime for sure. So, you don't want to end up with your kids working for robots and explain to your grandchild of robot slaves of like why you didn't buy Bitcoin when Bitcoin was 30 grand, right? And I want to make sure that I have the option to at least ride the AI wave and AI success in the most my own most logical way is to participate in the only thing that can keep them alive. So it's Bitcoin. So that's what I think. Like, don't worry about going over time. I still have time, so I'm very happy.
Thank you. I was going to ask, because we're in the same time zone, and you may or may not be getting hungry at this point in time, or your wife may be calling to you for dinner. I do have to ask, and I know we touched on this earlier, but we didn't end up going into it. What gives you? You don't have children yet. I don't know whether you plan to. What gives you faith? Is it just faith in humanity? Is it faith in what we're building? Is it faith in Bitcoin? Do you have something that you believe in more deeply? Is there what gives you deep peace?
Well, I think sort of like to know that nothing lasts forever. Like you have expiration date as a biological being, right? So one of the things that I learned from this is that so I lived through about multiple bear cycles now. So during the 2017, 2018 boom, I did not sell enough Bitcoin as I thought I need to live. So during the bear market, I just had like 3 years of not being able to enjoy myself as much as I want to. So I was living very frugally. And then every time I need to sell more Bitcoin, I just punch myself in the gut. It's like, oh, it's so painful to sell Bitcoin now at this depressed price. So I think that was like a really bad part of my Bitcoin life. And I just don't want to live it again. So I try to enjoy myself more nowadays, knowing that sometimes experiences are once in a lifetime. You might not be able to get to enjoy and experience this again. So I tend to value experiences more than things that are material. For example, when someone told me that, hey, there's this like ice snowing or ice driving with in Italy, and it's like it's in 2 days because someone else couldn't make it. I just drop my work and I go there and I come back 2 days later. Because I just realized that it's like if I don't do this, like how many more times I can drive, a Lamborghini on the snow, right? And then, for example, like when I go travel, instead of going like, I want to see this place, I want to take a photo of that building, like, I just go like, I want to find the most peaceful and beautiful place and just sit there doing nothing, right? Because when I get back to Australia, it's gonna be busy, I'm gonna meet clients all day, yada yada, things like that. And then when I go to travel, I don't want to do the same thing of like, I need to be at this attraction at this time, or the Louvre's gonna close by this time, the Mona Lisa is gonna get packed by this time. I mean, obviously I've done that before, and I just don't want to do it again. And for now, I just value sort of more, peace of mind. I think that sort of calms me down as well, like knowing that I just feel happy, like for me being able to do some of these experiences that I feel that it's hard to come by, or even look at this for example in motorsports. One reason why I love motorsports so much, because it's such an engaging thing from all these people that you meet, and all this sound and noise and feel, smell the fuel, and I like that kind of stuff, and these are money come by experiences as well, because like for us as team sponsors, we get access to a bit more than what a general admission public would be a grandstand. So I do enjoy doing that once in a while, and obviously I still need to get some work done, which thankfully I do. But it's still a long journey, right? And for me, like I think the Monochrome team works so well together is because like we share not just the love of things. Like some of us love motorsports, some of us love Bitcoin together, some of us love watches together. But there's always some kind of common interest within the team members. But what really ties us together is that like we set off to want to build the best product, and we're going to build Australia's first best Bitcoin ETF on the top stock exchange in the country, make history. Like everybody just motivated. Everybody just wants to be a part of that journey. And it's beautiful to sort of not having to worry with a lot of issues with staff, which typically exists in other industries. Like I've got other business owners saying that like they treat the staff so well, and then someone offers them $2 more an hour without even negotiating or asking anything, they leave. It's like, it happens a lot. It's like they don't even expect people to stay on for more than 6 months in some industry because people are just there's no loyalty to people in their jobs if they don't enjoy it and they don't feel it's part of their mission. And I think it's very different because when people say that, and it's very common with business owners in Australia, right? It's a big problem. It's actually some people are actually quite frustrated and they're just hiring overseas. But for me, I said like I don't really have that problem, because people just want to be a part of this. This is the historical moment. Like no one's done this before. Like it's like going to be the first part of the first team or people that engineered the space shuttle to go to the moon. Like it's one in a lifetime kind of thing. Like for the fact that we've gone through so much to get to this where Monochrome is today, and we're still pushing to get the Bitcoin ETF happening in Australia. And when it happens, it's going to be beautiful. Like we think of that day, the day that we've got together as a team, and we still dream of that day. I think it's close now, so fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed indeed. That does feel like a really positive and beautiful note to finish up on. If you had any final words for anyone out there who may be, if they've hung in there this long, who may be new to Bitcoin, who may be new to this whole space, who we're orange pilling 101, maybe this is their first touch point ever with anything to do with Bitcoin. First of all, hat off to anyone who's hung in there for this long with this conversation. But have you got any final words for them?
Yeah, so I think we've gone a bit over time, but I still hope that we can come back to actually go through some more details of like how do you actually view assess whether what financial products actually saying what they do, because a lot of people would say that there's a lot of people say that you're doing the same things and things like that. Everybody calls themselves a Bitcoin fund in Australia. Like, what makes you guys different? But there's a lot of resources that on ASIC's website you can validate very simply. Like just for the sake of the time, is that there's a ASIC Connect website or you can Google ASIC Professional Registry, and you can use that, type in people's AFSL number, and then look at what authorizations they have. If there's no crypto assets in it and it's not for retail and wholesale, and then they're saying they're doing something like what we're doing, then they're lying to you, right? I think there's only 3 crypto asset licenses in Australia that's ever been granted to an AFSL. We operate under one of them. Other two of them are sitting dormant at the moment. So anyone says that they have a crypto fund actually operating like what I said earlier, is that they're using crypto as a general financial product nature and then wrap it under a structure that basically exempts themselves for calling it crypto. So that's why they do not need the crypto asset authorizations, whether it's Bitcoin or other stuff in there. So I think these are a few things that ASIC has created for people to view and validate, because the database is quite updated, and it's the most extent anybody can go. And these are the stuff that financial professional, attorneys and lawyers and law enforcement uses, like the best stuff out there. And also from a research standpoint, Monochrome does a bit of a research about Bitcoin. We did have help early on with Haas McCook, also based in Australia. So he's helped us establish a lot of really good Bitcoin 101 content, from what is Bitcoin to even complex topics like the ethical framework for financial advisors to approach Bitcoin. There's a lot of the wide range of stuff. They're all accredited by the Financial Planning Association of Australia. So they have CBD points for financial services personnel to earn points to keep up with their license and things like that. But I do admit that they're a bit more technical speak than what a more explain like a 5 level. So that's one thing that we do at Monochrome Research. It's on the website, you can find it. Obviously, we're here to we like to chat, even though I do not have time to probably talk to every listeners that will want to talk to me, but I do spend a lot of time replying to DMs on Instagram or on Twitter. Twitter not so much these days. And I do love when people sort of like ask a lot of questions and a few times accidentally orange pilling themselves back. Like I've seen a lot. Like actually the beauty of it is like we don't to actually educate someone on Bitcoin, and someone actually wants to learn. Like because Bitcoin is so logical. To understand Bitcoin, everything is just step by step, most logical step to the next. Like you don't even need to convince them why Bitcoin is important. Usually you point in the right direction, and then you get it happens a lot. You get like a really long voice message, like 1.5 minute long Facebook message voice, and I was like, aha, this guy gets it. Once you open it, it's like this guy just orange pilled himself or herself. and it's beautiful to see. And because most people ask me like, oh, should I buy Bitcoin? Should I not? It's like, if you're asking whether you should buy Bitcoin or not, I have nothing to say to you. You're not ready. You got to do more research. So they go out and do more of their research, and it's like, what? And I point them to some key websites to look at, and then they start sort of looking up themselves. There are some people that kind of go some people that are too ambitious. They would go Bitcoin, and it's like they start to learn about different things, DeFi, and then they spread themselves really thin. And then they were like, I don't like this space anymore because it's too messy or too much scams, or I lost money in a DeFi contract or a meme coin scam, and now I don't like Bitcoin anymore. And that's happened. That's disappointing. But I think my job is to not tell what people should think or should buy Bitcoin or not, but we are just a beacon of consistency on a rock to offer the safest and most regulated way for people to access Bitcoin in Australia, period.
Great. And what I'll be sure to do is include a number of those links, and I might actually circle back to you and ask for any suggested links that we can put in the description so that anyone who's interested can look up some of that stuff themselves. Jeff, I am just ridiculously grateful for your time, your insights into a world that I'm not familiar with in terms of regulation in Australia and ASIC and how it works is just like nobody in Australia is going to have the wealth of information that you do in this space. But beyond all of that, congratulations on everything that you've achieved. What you're doing with Monochrome and what you're bringing to market is going to really help everyday Australians and help put Australia on the map properly in relation to digital assets. So thank you for what you're doing for the community. Thank you for what you're doing for Australia and for humanity. And thank you for the time that you've brought to this program. Really appreciate it.
You're too kind. Thank you, Kerry.
All the best. Take care for now.